I've gotten this logo, the Stay Fresh or 2006, even the 8K with the drop shadow, that kind of thing, whenever I do this. So I'll create a new, I'm going to create a new file. I'll just do print, and I'll do a tabloid sheet. It's horizontal. Create that. And then I'm just going to set some type. And I'll just start off with this. And then I've got a typeface called CC Biff Bam Boom that I kind of like. So what I want to look at is the appearance panel to start with. So if we've got, well, what workspace am I in here even? Okay, so I'm in the Essentials workspace, and over here along the side, this little sun looking icon is the panel I want to look at. If you don't see that, it is literally the fourth one down in our Windows list. But what the appearance panel does is allows us to apply raster effects as well as other more layered stroke effects and that kind of thing to shapes or type, anything like that. So I'm going to start with type because this is they work the same way, and type is really kind of convenient because if you've got a lot of like different promotional headlines to create, this is a good way of doing that kind of thing. So, and if I take a look at my appearance panel here, characters and opacity are the only two items I have. So for this object, that's what those are made up of. And I can add more. So I'm going to start this off by, I'm actually going to remove the fill color from this type by going over to my fill and changing it to none. And then go back here to my appearance panel. And if I go down to here at the bottom, there's an effects icon, but then there's also an add a new fill, and there's add a new stroke. So I'm just going to click add a new fill. You'll see that on that type, it drops a black fill, and I can see it now again. I don't have to actually delete the color or remove the color from the native object first, but I do think it's kind of helpful to keep everything in one place if we're working in the appearance panel. So we're just going to use colors out of the regular swatches panel. So if I can change the color of this type to blue for now. If I refer back, what did I do on my original? Oh, it was white with a dark blue and then a light blue shadow. Okay, it's all right. So I'm going to start this off as blue. And on this appearance panel, go back down here next to where I added the fill color, I'm going to add a stroke color. So if I click stroke, that will put a little thin stroke around it. And I'm just going to increase that stroke size to like 6 points. And this appearance panel, it's a layered thing. So right now my stroke is on top of my fill, and it's running right around the center of the edge. So it's sitting on top. But if I want to keep the blue type, the same weight as the original font, all I really need to do is click out here next to stroke and drag it below my fill, and that'll change its order. So I've talked about appearances before. We have actual shapes made up of paths, and then we've got things that are appearances. And I think whenever we talked about appearances before, it was things like drop shadows and blurs and that kind of stuff. And this is exactly the same kind of thing. These appearances all exist through this appearance panel, and they'll print and everything else. But if I go to outline mode, Command Y, this is just a single type layer, is all it is. I'm adding a stroke and the fill independently of that. So, and it's, if I do the same thing with a circle, say, or a square, do a square. I'm going to remove the fill from that, go to my appearance panel, and in this case, I can just go ahead and add the fill back and add a new stroke. And I'll drag it below the fill. This will kind of layer things out. If I look at it in preview mode, I still have a simple shape. So as I work through this panel, that's what I'm going to continue to see. No matter what I add or what I do here, if I go back to outline mode, these are always going to be original shapes. So let's see, looking back at all right, so it's actually white type with a dark blue shadow and bright blue drop shadow. So go away. I really need to turn those off. So I'm going to go here to my appearance panel and change my fill to white. And make my stroke a dark blue. Put that up. And make it a couple more points, maybe 8 points or so. Seems good. And I can continue to add strokes and kind of build and layer this out if I'd like to. If I add another stroke, I can either add another stroke by clicking on the stroke icon down here, or I can hold down my option key, click on this one, and drag it below. And maybe this one I change to a gold, I don't know. And I'm gonna make its weight heavier. So I can start layering different strokes and shapes without doing what I would have done before, which is copy a shape, paste it behind another shape, add a stroke to it and make it thicker, you know, the copy paste kind of a thing. This is all being stacked upon this original type that I have. And I can kind of go on from there. The nice thing is it's still live type. I can change it from stay fresh to stay crispy or whatever else I want to do. And I can still, maybe I take that S and make it a little bit bigger. I could drop the space line, open that up a little bit. I can manipulate all this type and it's all still editable, even with all of these different fills and strokes laid on top of them. So it is in the appearance panel. Actually, I'll just drag this off here. If I select the item, it's a layered kind of a thing, just like our layers panel would be. So to change the order of stuff, I can move it up and down. I'm using fills and strokes on the layers panel here. If I go over here, we kind of still see those happening. But it's better if I'm working the layers panel to do all that work from there. So with that type, I'm going to go up to my object menu and do an envelope distort, make it with a warp. Maybe instead of an arc, I do an arch. Let's lower that. And then, I don't know. Kind of give it a little bit of a swoop. Go away. All right, a little bit of a swoop. Arch this a little bit. And I can kind of start building some dynamic kinds of headlines that way, in a way that is very editable. So even in my, if I select the envelope, and the appearance panel is just this envelope setting, but if I double click on it, go into it, I can select my original type. Hang on, let's do this differently. Maybe I don't want to do my envelope yet. Let's get our type right, and then we'll go ahead and modify it. Let's make the envelope distort, just release it. And let's add if I go to my effects panel, open it up, we've got all of these other different kinds of options. So I could make this, let's add an extrude and bevel to that. Let's see what we get. And we can work in that panel. But if I go back to my appearance pane, here's that 3D materials effect I just added to it. And if I want to continue to work on this and not be bothered by the 3D aspect, I can just sort of hit that eyeball, turn it back to my regular text, and then turn it back on when I'm ready. I want to delete leaks. All right, so let's go. I want to remove. I'll select that. I can remove it by clicking the trash can. And instead, with effects, I tried to add that envelope distort before. But we've got all sorts of other different kinds of options we can apply here. So maybe we do, what am I looking for? Stylize, I could add a drop shadow. And maybe I offset that by 9 points. And I change my blur to 0. Change the color more like my gold, maybe. Or even better, bright blue. So I'm just kind of building these styles on top of this text. So you kind of understand how that works. Again, going back to my preview mode or my outline view, it's still just regular text. All of these different effects are just appearances, much like a regular stroke or a fill are. So what's kind of nice about these is that, we've got paragraph styles and character styles. We can also create object styles. So if let's pull that up, and if I go down, do I have it up? Maybe not. Window. Oh, graphic styles. That's what I want. Object styles are, oops. I want graphic styles. Object styles are in design. So with this type selected on this graphic styles panel, I can click add. It'll add a new graphic style there. Call this my promo type. And now, if I set another line of text, grab my select tool, and I can apply those same set of styles to that type. And these will print just fine. And everything else. So you can definitely set stuff up this way. The only thing, probably with the way I did this here, the only thing I would actually do different, I think, in a production environment is that right now this blue drop shadow, this hard edge drop I use the regular drop shadow and I just set its blur radius to 0 and I did an offset. So it's a raster item, the way I build it. I would probably actually just make a duplicate of the type just to handle that drop shadow, just to keep it all vector. But, it's a way to kind of keep type in a way that we can still edit it. And if I scale it down, everything will scale with it. Or I can reapply the original style to put all of the stroke weights back to the way my style sheet is. What else do we have in here that's fun? I'm just going to duplicate 2006. And yeah, so all of these different appearance items we can work with within the appearance menu. I kind of try to keep it simple. I don't like making these too complicated. That's, I don't know. That's probably just a personal thing more than anything, but it does allow us to build rather dynamic kinds of things. And we can convert all of this to shapes, although I think when we do that, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, and it kind of tests your skills a little bit, because if I take this 2006 and I decide to go to my object menu and expand the appearance, what's it do? So it actually, the first expand appearance breaks this into two parts. They're still editable type. If I do, yeah. And they're grouped together. It keeps things grouped together, so I'll ungroup those, and now I can separate them. And then if I select my 2006 again, go Object, Expand, look in preview mode. It expands my type, and then I got to go expand again, and it'll convert all of my outlines and strokes and shapes into paths. And then I just have to go sort through them to get good vector artwork out of it. So I'm going to do that again. I just kind of wanted to show you what it does, but I'm going to pull this off to the side. And I'm going to do this again with 8K. Let's make this nice and big. And I think this time, rather than keep it type, I'm just going to create outlines out of it right now. So that type selected, type, create outlines. And I'm just going to make my K a little smaller. Select both of those. I'm going to grab my shear tool and just kind of skew that a little bit. And here's kind of where I need to make a decision. Do I want it to treat 8K as one unit because they kind of overlap? Or do I want them to be separate? Like if I apply strokes to this, do I want the stroke on the K to overlap the 8? That's just kind of a decision. In my case here, I had it treat them as one object. So I'm going to do that. So I guess I could start by going to my appearance panel. Where's my appearance panel? There it is. And I wonder if I go under Effects, Pathfinder, maybe we'll do that. I'll just select both of them and I'll just go to my regular Pathfinder panel and unite those. And now I'll go to my appearance panel. Let's remove the black first. And in my appearance panel, add a fill. make it blue. And then I'm going to add a stroke to that, except this one I think I'll make gold. If I kind of zoom in here. Actually, I'll make mine darker gold. So I've got the stroke, make it a little heavier maybe. And I always like to keep the thing about strokes is they actually fill the stroke to the outside of the shape and the inside of the shape. I like keeping my shapes their original form, so I'm just going to slide the stroke underneath the fill. And then I'll just duplicate this. Actually, if I just add another stroke. Go to the back one, and let's make this a darker blue. Actually, I'll make it quite a bit darker. And then I'll go back over here. Actually, I'm doing this one a little bit differently than the original, but I'm going to do a dark blue drop shadow on it then. So I've done all that. Go to my effects. Stylized drop shadow. And we'll just make it so just with a couple simple, appearances, we can make that just a little more dynamic. And we can always go back into, we can always go back in and maybe we offset this drop shadow a little bit more. I only had it 9 points before, but maybe this time it's 16. What else we got with the drop shadow? Oh, so opacity is at 75%. So let's make that 100. There we go. That darkens it up. Maybe I decide I don't like the yellow stroke on or the gold stroke. Maybe I want it just to be white. I can make that change easy enough. But appearances can be a way of taking and creating artwork that's a little easier to manage and a little easier to make edits to. And then, like I said, you can save all these styles as well. I'm going to go back to gold on my stroke, I think. Make it a little heavier. Make my dark blue stroke a little heavier. So you kind of get the idea of how that works. And I kind of show you because it might be a good way. I'm just kind of thinking about the wayfinding and some other stuff. If you want to do anything with very dynamic type, this is a good way to keep good consistent text styles. So something to consider anyway. But we hadn't really, it's one of those panels we haven't really talked about, and it keeps everything really editable all the way through. Even the, we can edit the drop shadow, we can turn that off, and we can try different variations. Maybe we don't like, what's it look like without the gold, Just eyeballs to turn on and off different aspects of it, and that kind of thing. But just know that pretty much anytime you use anything from this effect menu, for the most part, 3D materials or distort and transform, whatever you're applying it to, you can always go to this appearance panel and find that item there, even if you didn't build it through here. So I had my, I think from a couple of weeks ago, I had sort of a racetrack shape that I was working with. Creating an odd shape. And then go to my effect panel, grab my 3D tools maybe. Make that plane instead. And even though I didn't do this through the appearance panel, if I go back to the appearance panel, there's that 3D, with this object selected, there's that 3D in materials, and I can turn that off, turn it on, and I can still, edit that shape easier if I turn off the 3D in materials option, make further edits to it. Maybe we want to different kind of shape, I don't know. But I can make those edits easier that way. So anything you do from this effects panel, add to an object, you should be able to go to the appearance panel, find it, and either remove it. If I didn't want to apply the 3D effect to this shape, select that, and it's still got a trash can down here in the corner, I can remove that. So understand kind of how that works. So I'm going to keep this 3D shape because I want to go back to that here in a moment. All right. So that's the appearance panel. Very simply, without doing anything too involved, but you can do a lot with that. And like I said, the nice point about it, just again, is that you can save anything you create, you add here under the appearance panel, you can save that as an object style or a graphic style, and then apply it to other objects within your artwork. So it's great for, we used to use it a lot for in-store point of sale and that kind of thing, where we needed larger, bolder type. We did a lot of this kind of Mark's Supermarket kind of graphics. And they're all self-contained. All right. So that's about all the time I'll spend on the appearance panel. I am going to drag all this back onto my, close up all my windows. And drop that in there. All right. So anything we create in Illustrator, we can also rasterize if we want to, which basically will turn it into a pixel-based object, which, why would you want to do that? There are usually a variety of reasons to do that. One of them is, and an easy one, to, since I've already got this racetrack kind of a thing up, this is kind of a perfect example. Because the 3D tools are a raster effect, if I want to expand this, if I go to my object menu, go to expand appearance, it'll do that, but you'll see that it creates a raster object out of it. It doesn't create paths that I can work with. So, so I can take this, I said it turns it into a raster object by default, but I can now use my ImageTrace tools on this to actually get vector artwork back out of it. So if I go to my, in order to do that, we're going to use the, if we look on our properties panel, we should have an ImageTrace option down here. You can also get to that through the window menu, ImageTrace. But before I can image trace anything, I've got to rasterize it inside of Illustrator. And what I've kind of found is that this should be a raster object right now, but if I go back to my object menu and rasterize this again, I can specify the color model on it. So I'm going to leave it CMYK 300 DPI, say OK. So now it's just an embedded image is all this is. If I go to my ImageTrace panel, bring that up. And I've got a bunch of presets here. I'm just going to use the default preset on this. And you see that there's a bunch of different options, 3, 6 colors, 16 colors, black and white, sketched art, a bunch of different kinds of things you can try. I want to use the default. And it's going to warn me that it might be slow. I'm going to say that's fine, I don't care. And then because that was a color image, it kind of disappeared. And I want to make it black and white. I need to adjust my threshold. So if I pull my threshold out towards more, it should bring that shape back into place, into view. and I'm going to open my advanced, and I can control the detail in the path that's created from this by adjusting my path slider. I can affect the quality of the corners, which I'll have another object we're going to use here in a moment that'll show this a little bit better. Noise, some of these you just got to kind of play around with a little bit, but paths should be good. And then I just want to slide down here to where it says ignore color. When I outline this, I just want the black outline. That's all. That's the only object I have. But if I don't, by its nature, the image trace looks at this entire area. And if I image trace it as it is, go ahead and expand this, I'll get an outline for the white shapes as well as the black shapes. So I want to duplicate this. So if I do that, go all the way down here to the bottom and say expand. Now I've got a piece of vector art, but I've got, and it's all grouped together. If I ungroup it, you'll see that let's go ungroup all. I have a shape for that white, and I've got a shape for the black. I can show that better by changing the fill color of that. So I get two shapes, actually three shapes. I get the inside as well. Most of the time I want to avoid this. So if I do that, I can clean it up that way easily enough. But if I come back over to this one, which I haven't expanded yet, and go down here to ignore color, check that box. By default, it'll ignore the white. And I can use the dropper to tell it which color to ignore. I could make it the black if I wanted to. But if I tell it to ignore the white, and then I expand it, click the expand button, now I just get that one shape. And the only thing that's really kind of wrong with it is that I left that path setting right around the middle, and I get an awful lot of extra points in here. If you can, you should clean those up. And that we've done this before too. If I select that and I go to my object menu down here to path simplify, I get this pop up, and you see by default it already cleaned that up quite a bit. And I can slide it a little further, get fewer points. If you go too far, it starts to affect the quality of the outline, but you can kind of strike a happy medium pretty well with this. Something like that. And you can always go in and custom edit a little bit too. So I removed a bunch of those extra points, cleaned that up. And I can always grab my pen tool and come in here and pop out some of these unnecessary ones. Some of them need to stay, but I only had the one really. Command Y. So now I have this object as a piece of vector art, and I created it from from my 3D shapes panel. So let's try something else with, I'm just going to pull him down out of the way. Let's try and do it. We can, using the same process, what we just did here, we can try like a halftone screen and make it vector if we want to. So if I'm going to just create a gradient, create a shape, go to my fill panel, and I'm just going to keep this simple. I'm going to make a black and white. No stroke on it. And why don't we edit this gradient and make it vertical. Wrong one. And I'm going to go to my effect menu, down to pixelate, color halftone. And I'm going to set my max radius to 24, I think. And all of my channels, so this halftone filter, just a quick explanation of what it does. If I had a 4-color image here, it's actually going to create a halftone with all of the different color halftones at the appropriate screen angles. I'm just doing this with a black and white image, so I don't really want that. I'm just going to make all these channels read as 45 degrees. And say OK. And I'll get that nice little halftone effect. That's kind of small. So if I go back to my, start docking some of these things. If I go back to my appearance panel, here's that color halftone. I can just open that back up. I'm going to change 24 to 60 and say OK. I get a much bigger halftone, a little nicer. And that number depends upon, I mean, the number you've got to put in there, you just got to kind of try it until you get something the size you like. It all depends upon the resolution of your file and that kind of stuff. So, but now I've got, if I do Command Y, I've still just got a square shape. But I can convert this to a piece of vector art as well, just exactly the same way that we did the racetrack. So if I select this now, I won't say this is good enough. This is what I want. If I go to my object panel, I'm going to rasterize this. And I'm going to leave it CMYK 300 DPI. And then go to my ImageTrace panel again. Wait. I already wrote, did I? Yeah. Right, I did rasterize it. Select that. ImageTrace default. I'll get my little warnings, say OK. And where's my, all right. Then with my ImageTrace panel, I'm going to set the threshold. I'm going to leave the threshold at 128. Where's that? I think that'll give me what I want. Yeah, 128. If you slide that threshold number along, you can kind of see how it changes what you get if you go to the ends. Advanced, pass I'm going to set high and set up around 70%. And when I think that's going to be good enough, I'll go down here and tell it to ignore my white color. And then I'll say expand. And now if I do Command Y, I've got the shape that I can then go in and change the fill color on or whatever else I want to do. But I can create a vector piece of artwork like that pretty easily. Maybe I make this, maybe what I want to do is make this dark blue. And place it inside of my type. I could do that easy enough by just duplicating this 8K type I had created, copy and paste it. Use it as a clipping mask. Object, clipping mask, make. And lay it back over top of my artwork. The reason I like keeping it as a clipping mask is I can still go in and kind of resize this a little bit more if I need to. Kind of understand what I did. You can use this process with any rasterized piece of artwork, which brings me to last but not least, let's get all this stuff out of the way. Grab my 8K, pull it up here. I'm going to go out to, I'm going to go to pexels.com. You could probably go to Google if you wanted to, but I don't want any copyright entanglements, so I'm going to go to Pexels, and I want to look for like a concrete background. And there are bunches of different options. I think I'll grab this one. And I don't need a very big version of this. If I click on it, I'm not going to download the biggest one that they have available. I'm going to do like 1280 by 960 maybe. And the only reason I pick, it doesn't matter what size image you pick. It's just that it's going to take, the bigger the image, the longer it'll take to do what we're going to do. So I'm going to do a smaller image. But grab that, I'm going to download it. And then, whoops, go back to Illustrator. And I'm going to create a new document. I'll just make it tabloid. Again, it doesn't really matter what size. And I'm going to place that image that I just downloaded in here. So Command-Shift-P. I'll go to my downloads folder and find it. And I'll just place it on my page. And then once we do that, I'm going to go back and do the same steps that I did with the other objects, although I'm going to make one little change. So I'm going to select that image now. I'm going to go to my object menu and rasterize it, because it has to be rasterized. Basically, rasterizing creates a pixel object out of it embedded into the Illustrator file. So rasterize that, CMYK 300, that's fine. And now I'll go back to my Properties panel, click ImageTrace. This time though, I'm going to do maybe 3 colors. So remember I told you that on our wayfinding, we want to give some idea, some sense of the material that things are created out of. This is how we can do that. We can create textures that we can then place into our Illustrator file. So could you do it with a raster file? Yes, you could, but I'm going to keep all this vector, so I'm just going to do an image trace with this image, and then if I needed to output it to a large format size, 18 by 24 or something like that, I've got all the resolution I need to do it. So we have our image, we've rasterized it. Go to our image trace. Oops. And this time, instead of, you could do default and just do a 1 color tracing on this. You'd have to adjust that threshold to get a decent looking pattern. But I'm actually going to do this as a 3 color option this time. So it's going to take this image, break it down into strictly 3 colors. So if I select 3 colors, say OK. Wait on it. Takes a hair bit longer. This is why I picked a smaller file. But, so you can see that given all of the default settings, it did a halfway decent trace of it. I mean, if I zoom in on it, you can see that it made it a little more coarse because I've only got so many, there's only 3 colors here. But you can do that. Every time you mess with your settings, you got to wait on it to re-preview again, which will take basically the amount of time it just took every time. I'm going to leave it as is. Decide that, I think that looks fairly good for 3 colors. So I don't want to ignore any colors this time. So I'm just going to, with that selected, I'm going to go up here to should be able to do it through my panel, or up here in the control bar. I can expand this, and now it's a 3 gazillion point texture. But then I can save this now as, concrete texture, and I can place this into my wayfinding file if I like. Time is it? All right. So just a couple of things on this. If you want to edit the coloring of this, there's a variety of ways to do it, but this is all grouped together as one object. If I go ahead and ungroup it all and sort of zoom in, If you click, you can grab and pull out different sections. You can kind of customize what you're doing this way if you want. Grab that, only take pieces you want, maybe. But if you want to use the whole thing, I could select just one of these colors, go to my select menu, same fill color. That'll select all of the shapes in that image of the same color. And you could group those together or compound path them. I'm just going to group them together. So now I've basically put together all of the light gray colors in my texture. If I zoom in here, I could select the next darkest color, select same fill color. That'll select all shapes of that same fill color, group them together. And last but not least, I could grab my the darkest gray color, do the same thing, select all, or it's actually select same fill color, and group all of those together. But that just makes it easier that, if I decide that the darker gray is too dark, I can select just that shape, go to my swatches panel, maybe I select a lighter gray for that. Don't want to fill it with maybe sort of vary the texture. I think it should be there, and if maybe that should actually be kind of lighten that up. I'm just going to resize my artboard to match the size of it. Save it. This will be my vector concrete. Drop that into my Now I can use that as a placed image within my wayfinding signs. So if I create a new document, and it's going to be something like that. I can place my vector concrete file in there. Oh. There we go. And now use my shape as a clipping mask. But using that, especially for images like this, I mean, I did it with concrete here, but you can do it with wood really easily, you know, metals, water, anything you really want to try. Anything there I needed to do again, or are we good?